On July 3, 2017, the FBI released an intelligence assessment entitled Black Identity Extremist, likely to target law enforcement. Released by the FBI to state local law enforcement and leaked to press agencies. The report detailed criteria for assessments and investigations and threat levels allegedly posed by Black Identity Extremists, also known by the acronym BIE. But who qualified as a Black Identity Extremist, and what was the criteria for being labeled as such? The FBI defined BIE as individuals who seek wholly or in part through unlawful acts or force of violence in response to racism or perceived injustice in American society, and do so in furtherance of establishing a separate Black homeland or autonomous Black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. And with that wording, in response to a tip, a social media post, or a hunch, anyone advocating for Black upliftment, advancement, excellence, and even those sympathetic to the idea of independent Black communities and social organizations fits into the category of a Black identity extremist. The report identified 6 individuals as BIE, identified suspected of committing retaliatory violence with BIE motivations: Micah Johnson, Zale Thomas, and Gavin Long, and 3 unnamed individuals. On July 17, 2016, Gavin Eugene Long ambushed and shot 6 local law enforcement officers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, before eventually being killed by police. The deceased victims included 1 African-American officer and 1 white officer from the Baton Rouge Police Department, and 1 white officer from the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. Long had expressed Black separatist rhetoric both on social media and in his manifesto, including rants against crackers, in reference to an African-American male killed by police in Baton Rouge on July 5, 2016. In his manifesto, Long expressed his frustrations with the police and criminal justice system in the United States and saw his actions as a necessary evil in order to create substantial change. According to open source reporting, Thompson was angered after a recent spat of deaths at the hands of the police. In his own writings, Thompson advocated for armed struggle against the oppressors and mass revolt against the U.S. social, economic, and political systems, which he perceived to be white-dominated. He also described the United States as a beast and called for chopping off its head, hands, and feet. NYPD observed tattoos on Thompson's body that indicated he was affiliated with the Black separatist extremist group, and pocket litter indicating he may have been associated with another Black separatist group, according to law enforcement reporting. On July 7, 2016, Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 law enforcement officers, killing 5 in downtown Dallas, Texas, during a First Amendment protected protest, before being ultimately killed by police. 5 deceased officers were white. The planned public event was protesting recent officer-involved shootings of African Americans in Louisiana and Minnesota.
During the hours of negotiating, that eventually broke down. And I want to share with you some of the comments from this suspect. The suspect said he was upset about Black Lives Matter. He said he was upset about the recent police shootings. The suspect said he was upset at white people. The suspect stated he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. The suspect stated that we will eventually find the IEDs. The suspect stated he was not affiliated with any groups, and he stated that he did this alone. We cornered one suspect, and we tried to negotiate for several hours. Negotiations broke down. We had an exchange of gunfire with the suspect. We saw no other option but to use our bomb robot and place a device on its extension for it to detonate where the suspect was.
The report further assessed that the likelihood of increased violence began in 2014, shortly after the death of Mike Brown, Mike Brown's death prompted widespread protest and birthed a new generation of civil rights activists, some of who would meet a suspicious demise just like the civil rights leaders of yesterday. The Black Identity Extremist label goes back to the 1960s civil rights movement.
There should be more shooting than looting. That's the only thing I agree with. Black folks trying to loot when they should be shooting. If you're going to loot your gun store.
Groups like the Black Panthers and Black Liberation Army were targeted with counterintelligence tactics that left many members imprisoned or dead. Newly unclassified files detail the surveillance of BIE groups, individuals, and organizations from 2000 to 2017. Organizations such as the New Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton Gun Club, Black Guerrilla Family, the African American Defense League were targeted, and grassroots protest movements in different cities were also surveilled. Counterintelligence, counterterrorism divisions, local, state, federal law enforcement, even air marshals, were involved in investigating BIE groups. The tactics varied, but the most used was confidential sources who worked around the clock to monitor groups and individuals, even being approved for holiday pay. Documents details dozens of confidential sources within BIE organizations and movements, some even holding leadership positions. In the early 2000s, the group targeted the most was the New Black Panther Party. The subject of a meeting at FBI headquarters were several divisions from around the country in attendance. New Black Panther Party chapters were identified in each city, and confidential sources were placed or developed at different levels of the organization. The result was 10 arrests and prosecutions for different offenses, from weapons charges to robbery. Documents detail the particulars of each case, and some pages indicate that black bag job tactics may have been used, like those used in the 1960s to 70s. But more concerning are the documents that detail the monitoring of nonviolent protest against police brutality, something which is protected under the First Amendment. Some people were followed, even after the protest, and documents suggest that those identified as BIE were monitored, even at their places of employment. Anyone labeled BIE faced the full weight of the federal government, but many started to raise concerns. BIE designation linked people and groups who did not share similar ideology and had no contact or interaction with each other. The looming question was, could one be designated a domestic terrorist just for identifying as pro-black? The concerns mounted. Questions from news media and public officials, and eventually congressional oversight hearings, ultimately led to the retirement of the term Black Identity Extremist.